Welcome in, Bears fans, to this episode of Wear and Tear, a Bears post-game show. My name is Mason West, Dr. Mason West, physical therapist, and one of the hosts at Second City Gridiron. We get to talk about that Bears loss yesterday. The Bears lost 20-23 against the Detroit Lions in ridiculous fashion, is the easiest way to put it. I think there were a bunch of threads yesterday going around, this week, last week, going around, basically saying, how could the Bears possibly lose any worse? And somehow the Bears found out a way to lose worse, right? We'll get to that. We're gonna talk a little bit though, just about the offense, the defense, the special teams, some of that, and then we'll get into the last 32 seconds of the game. So first and foremost, this Bears team as a whole struggled in that first half. When you look at some of those stats, the Bears had 2 first downs in the first half. Ridiculous. The Lions had 18. The Lions had 8 first downs rushing, had 8 first downs passing. So they were able to do it in multiple different ways. On third down in the first half, the Bears are 0 for 5. The Lions actually, not as crazy thing, 4 for 9, but they also made up for it by going for it on fourth down multiple times. So, keep that in mind. Total net yards, 53 for the Bears. 53. They had 19 total offensive plays. That is one more than the number of first downs that the Lions were able to get in that first half. Net yards rushing, 144 for the Lions to a paltry 19 for the Bears. Net yards passing, 135 for the Lions, 34 for the Bears. That's horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Red zone efficiency. I mean, that's the only place really that you can say that the Bears did relatively well, was the fact that the Lions were 1 for 4 in the red zone. But other than that, there really wasn't much to speak of as a whole in that first half for this Bears team. The Lions were getting whatever they wanted on the ground. They were able to move the ball. They spread the ball around. You had a guy like Sam Laporta who, if you follow, maybe you have him on your fantasy team or anything like that, he's struggled this year. He had 2 touchdowns on you. When you look at the combination of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, I said this right, they ran all over you. I mean, David Montgomery was a workhorse. He had 21 carries. The Lions were going to try to let Montgomery absolutely just run ragged over the Bears. Hit 4.2 yards per carry. Did you would take that in a second. I mean, you compare that to DeAndre Swift, who gave you 3.5. Wasn't great. But Montgomery ended up with 88 yards. No touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs, 9 attempts for 87 yards, 9.7 yards per carry. That's absolutely ridiculous. And then Jared Goff, he did good. 2 touchdowns to both of them, Sam Laporta, 221 yards, 100 passer rating, and 21 for 34 completions. Go to the pass catchers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, arguably a bit quieter. I mean, 73 yards. I'd say it's still, it wasn't as loud of a 73 yards as you would say, but he was still 5 receptions on 7 targets. I mean, you had Tim Patrick, who just is a guy at this point. He's there really to block. That's why they ended up getting him. But he had 2 big receptions for 48 yards. David Montgomery, 3 catches for 36 yards. I mean, it goes on and on. The Bears, on the other hand, they could not get the ball moving, right? Eventually, the Bears were able to flip a switch, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit once we get through some of this other stuff. But it takes so long for this team to get momentum. And we've seen this all year, right? I mean, it took them how many weeks to score on their opening drive? It took forever. They start slow. And, mainly I thought that was a Waldron thing. But Thomas Brown's been better, don't get me wrong. But that's still a problem. And you saw that today. Now, I want to know, I was going to say, I love what Thomas Brown's been doing with Caleb, just in terms of creating more structure for him within the offense, being able to channel better what Caleb does so well, right? Being able to go and point him to, this is when to be Superman. That, there was that clip going viral all over. And this is when to, hey, take your check down. Hey, this is when your first read is there. And we saw that a lot where Caleb was able to play out of structure today. You saw that constantly throughout the game. Caleb was not the problem today. Even if you want to talk about that final play, which I'll get to momentarily, I still don't necessarily put that on Caleb in terms for that play, but there were a couple of sacks there. But the thing that's beautiful about what Caleb was able to do, especially near the end of the game, was he would take a sack, and now you're sitting on 2nd and 14 for the sake of argument. But he was still able to move the ball. He was still able to attack downfield. And he was able to move, and he moved the chains, and ultimately put the Bears in a position where they really could have not just they should have tied this game. I was sitting there talking to my wife, talking to my sister. They should have won this game because they should have been able to score a touchdown and hand the ball back to Jared Goff with a handful of seconds left on the clock, but they weren't able to do that. Speaking a little more specifically defensively, they weren't a great defending team before. You lose Andrew Billings, that hurts. You lose Jaquan Brisker, that hurts. Jonathan Owens has stepped in actually admirably. So first you put in Hicks. Hicks did actually really well. I prefer Jonathan Owens. That's just my thing. But Hicks gets hurt. I have Jonathan Owens. And Owens has actually played well in Hicks' stead, and Hicks actually played well in Brisker's stead. But I think what you're missing is that run defense. So now instead of it being, a run for 2 or 3 yards, it's a run for 6 or 7. And every once in a while, Jahmyr Gibbs had a run long of 28. Dan Montgomery had a long of 13. You have more of those kinds of runs as well when you're missing a Brisker. So we knew that coming into this game, that was going to be a problem. We also know that they're missing, we talked about Billings, but your backups, you don't have heft in the middle. And without that heft in the middle, the off Lions line, which is a very good offensive line, is going to be able to push you. You also weren't able to consistently get a pass rush on Jared Goff. I don't have a lot of the deeper metrics, the pressures and all that. If you want to, go look that up. Just there was other stuff to talk about here. You got more pressure on him in the second half, but that was also because you started to bring more 5 and 6 man pressures. And so you finally were able to get there more consistently. And they had one drive in particular where Goff had just 3 incompletions in a row leading to a punt. But leading up to that lead they had, that 16-0 lead they had, just felt larger than it really was, right? It didn't feel necessarily like you were 2 scores away. It felt, and that was because of how easily they were able to move the ball. And there were some times the Lions shot themselves in the foot. Special teams was fine, right? I mean, actually, Torrey Taylor had some really good punts today. He punted 4 times for 223 yards. That was a 55.8 average, and he hit a long at 58. Only one of those punts was inside the 20. Now, part of that is also, field position thing. A lot of times the Bears were going 3 and out a lot. And so, you're punting from deeper. So, you got to take that with a grain of salt. But Torrey Taylor did his job. DeAndre Carter, it's frustrating because, you had that one in particular, that one punt that it landed on the 0.5 yard line as he waved his teammates off, waved himself off. You question why necessarily that happened there. Was there from last week? Is he, now a little gun shy of trying to catch that? Because you have to have a feel for not just where you are, where that ball's going to hit, but also those gunners from the other team, where they are. And ultimately, you cannot allow the ball to bounce like that when the gunners are as close as they are. One thing that's actually interesting from a little special team stuff thought process, you wonder sometimes with Torrey Taylor, is his leg too big where he outkicks his coverage consistently? Look at that, actually more than half where perfect. If you're watching live on YouTube, outkick my coverage. Or if it's just simply that the gunners for the Bears are too slow, because you see time and time again where these other teams are able to, right, take for the Lions, Alexander, who is not their main returner. Their main returner is actually hurt. They're hoping to get him back. He's incredibly dynamic, but their returner for this game on punts, Alexander, he had 4 returns for 42 yards, an average of 10.5 and a long of 23. The Bears had 0 returns. So when you look at that, you ultimately have to wonder, again, is it simply that Taylor's outkicking his coverage in hey, Torrey, we need you to control this ball a little better? Or we need some faster gunners that can actually get downfield and not allow 10.5 average across your returns. Keeping that in mind. All right, diving into some of the specifics of the end of the game here. And also, I'm going to be periodically checking my phone during this because there is Eberflus is supposed to talk at 9 a.m. today. You'd imagine that if there's an announcement to be made about him, it would happen in the next 30 to 45 minutes. So if I pause, that's why. But some point to the final 32 seconds as say, Caleb should have been better. First, look at the play. Borum gets absolutely blown by, and even Braxton takes an L, more than he should. It's a QB draw. That's the play that was called. And in order to complete that draw, the tackles need to push their rushers upfield so that Caleb can drop back and duck under through the middle. The rush kicks are so fancy, there's no chance. Then there's mayhem. I know I had some people, texting me, tweeting at me. I have family members who know I do this, all that jazz, being like, hey, Caleb, it was Caleb's fault. He should have gotten the play out faster. That ultimately they should have been able to get to the line and got a play called. When you get sacked and lose that much, when it's that impactful from both a yardage standpoint, but also an emotional standpoint with a rookie quarterback, you call a damn timeout. you don't say, hey, Caleb, all right, let's get this play off, try to get a little chunk, get out of bounds or whatever the case may be. Let's get our timeout called. You call it then and there. Caleb tries to get the team lined up. Caleb says that there was a big communication, quote unquote, between him and coaches. He got a play call in at 13 seconds. 13 seconds. Half the time had gone by before he got the play call. Now, who does that fall on, right? Is that a Thomas Brown thing where he didn't get the call out fast enough? Was that a Matt Eberflus thing where there needs to be communication where Eberflus has to tell Thomas, hey, we're going for this right now. We're not calling a timeout. If you saw the shots of Eberflus on the sideline, to me, it looked like he froze. Took too long to get that in. I'm leaning more towards the latter, that the communication between Eberflus over to Thomas Brown was too slow in order for Thomas Brown to get the play to Caleb. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I feel. Caleb saw the time remaining. He realized they didn't have enough time for the play that was called. Likely you're not trying to set up a field goal of some kind. So he changed it. An attempt at a touchdown and a win where Rome seemed to slow down or even lose sight of the ball. Not even Rome's fault. I mean, with all that chaos, but he really could have made a better play on the ball, either catching it, might have gotten tackled at the 1 or 2 yard line. But how we saw that Lions defender coming up on his back, there's a good chance you could have gotten pass interference called if he was able to run underneath that ball a bit better. To me, again, I got to watch the L22, but it looked like to me Rome slowed down. Or lost track of it. You kind of see him throw his hands in a way where it's just I don't know what's going on here. And a big part of that was the chaos beforehand. You know how you prevent that? You call a damn timeout. Again, timeout issues. This is absolutely insane. In my opinion, the firing of Matt Eberflus is all but done. I know there are some Bears fans that still worry that it may not happen. At this point in time, the question is, will it happen before the end of the season? Will it happen today? I know you're also seeing there might be a chance that the firing doesn't happen until Saturday night. There's a couple layers to this. One, I don't think you trot him out there in about 45 minutes and say, hey, Matt, address the media, and then let him go tomorrow night. The reason that tomorrow night's been brought up is because the news cycle of the Sunday games would dampen the volume of the firing. And that's one of the biggest things that ultimately this ownership group cares about is being embarrassed, what we look like in the league, things like that. On that note, George McCaskey hates more than anything is being embarrassed publicly. With many of the Bears' recent gaps buried behind the wall of other noon games, the ineptitude of Eberflus was dampened across national news. But yesterday, during prime time, pre-Thanksgiving dinner, 11:30 a.m. slate Central Time, it was on full display. National tweets, Lewis, all across the board. I'm going to read off some of the tweets that were thrown out there after that game. J.J. Watt, man, I feel for you, Bears fans. That was just brutal. Little coaching malpractice. Stephen A. Smith, no timeout, not spiking if the ball you get off just one play in the final 26 seconds. Is there any more proof needed for the Chicago Bears and their fans everywhere that a new coach is needed, that it's time for a change? Sylvie from Waddle and Sylvie. Highlighting that Bill Cowher said, Matt Eberflus just froze. Nick Wright, Eberflus not realizing they didn't have a timeout needs to be the final moment of his coaching career with the Bears. Shannon Sharp, WTF was that, Bears? Use your final timeout after the sack. You still have 34 seconds left. Continues, Mike Greenberg saying, this is absolutely no excuse for an NFL coach to allow that to happen. Hell, there's no excuse for a high school coach with a timeout in his pocket, inexcusable, in a Bears season filled with coaching blunders. This was a new low. And then I'll finalize that one with Louis Riddick's. You don't deserve to be in the role of head coach saying stuff like this. He said a different word, embarrassing. And that was to Eberflus's comments, basically doubling down, saying that what he did was the right choice. And if anything, throwing Caleb under the bus, saying that he should have gotten the ball off faster. That is absolutely bullshit. You know, this whole thing the last couple of weeks where you've seen Eberflus almost go 180 and taking all, like, oh, it was my fault. I'm taking responsibility. You know, the burden's on me. I need to be better. That was all fake. It's all absolutely fake. Eberflus is just looking out for himself. He's in and over his head. He's a terrible coach. If you want more reason as to why Eberflus should be fired again, or at least it should be announced in the next 30 minutes, Kevin Fishbane had a couple interesting tweets here with some stats. The Bears are now 101, 25, and 2 when they don't turn it over on offense and take the ball away at least once on defense since 1942. 4 of those 25 losses have come in the month in November with this team. He continues to say, Bears record in games with 0 turnovers and 1+ takeaway by a head coach. Lovie Smith was 16-3. Mark Trestman was 6-1. John Fox was 6-4. Matt Nagy was 8-0. Matt Eberflus 6-5. That is absolutely horrendous. Another stat for you. Bears are the first team since the 1955 Eagles to have a positive point differential through 12 games with only 4 wins or less. Matt Eberflus has missed on the OC hire, had a guy that was better in the building. Again, we can have Thomas Brown conversations. Had other individuals in the building who are doing better elsewhere. Cliff Kingsbury, whatever. I mean, I never want a Cliff. I think it's going to fall off a cliff, no pun intended, eventually. But because we're seeing that already, because his offenses always do. You know, Liam Cohen is doing great with the Bucks. Arguably, there were other options, long story short. He has an abysmal challenge record. He has challenged 10 times in his coaching career and has overturned 2 of them. He is 2 for 10. He is 0 for 5 this year. He can't defend a lead. He can't defend a Hail Mary. Had his players question him in the media, there's been a lot of previous ones. We know that Kevin Byard said some things. We know that Jalen Johnson has been vocal previously. After this game, Kyler Gordon was asked if there was a reason for these close losses, if there was like a fundamental underlying reason. He says, next question, no comment. He could have defended his coach and the current standing of the team, but his silence speaks volumes. The most damning may have come from Keenan Allen. I feel like we did enough as players to win the game. So he is saying that across the board, we as a team, as players on the field, did enough. So where does that then go to? It goes to the coaches. And at the end of the day, the person that should be held the most responsible for the coaches is the head coach. That's it. It's simple as that. He plays down to his competition. We saw that with the Patriots game. He showed he does not comprehend the worth of extra yards for game-winning field goal attempts, nor does he take his kicker's preferences into consideration. And, of course, the aforementioned clock management snafu that has to be an all-time worst. All of that wrapped up being said, Matt Eberflus absolutely needs to be let go. I know I'm like preaching to the choir here. Pretty much no one in the chat who is listening to this or listening to the podcast going forward, I don't think there's that many Eberflus defenders left, but the front office has to be willing to be uncomfortable at this point because you are ultimately hurting your rookie quarterback and the rest of this team that's going to be here in 2025 and forward. It's hurting the development. You're going to create a cancer in the locker room because when you're pissed and mad at your manager, your boss ahead of you, you don't often get to go and have that conversation with them, right? What ultimately happens is it ends up being taken out on your fellows. You get mad at your friend, you get mad at the person in the cubicle, you get mad at Sandy who, blows and pops bubble gum too loud. And that's not Sandy's fault, right? It's the person ahead of you. person above. And in order to allow this team to be able to continue growing with the games remaining, he has to be on. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to dive into some of our categories. We got that dog in us. Underdog is a place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all of your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So, turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. I have used multiple sites and apps to enhance my game day, and Underdog is quite unique. Something pretty cool is their vulture protection. If you select a designated running back to score a touchdown in your pick'em entry and they get vultured, they will rescue your entry. Red Zone Rush, a game where you won't find anywhere else. Just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes and left for no. Simple as that. Plus, your entry will be automatically boosted and you will get a 51% profit boost when you play. This season, Underdog's going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like Profit Boost. Pump up your winnings in just a tap when you apply the boost to eligible entries, discounts. You'll get adjusted projections on certain player stats to give you a better shot at the big W. Free picks. You'll get adjusted projections on certain players. Free picks. They're basically a sure thing. A player just has to get higher than 0.5, let's say, passing yards for that selection to win. Plus, all new users get a free pick. Download the app today and use code CITY, C-I-T-Y, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Every player, every hero racing touchdown, just select higher or lower on Underdog. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 3342. In New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. All right, some of the specifics from the game itself. So as we thought and not. Something that I was expected to happen on the field that did, and something a bit surprised by. As I thought, the Bears' run game continues to struggle. DeAndre Swift ran 39 yards, 11 attempts. He had a long of 12. Caleb Williams, 4 attempts for 39 yards, long of 13. His average was 9.8. Swift's was 3.5. Now, you also had Roshan out with a concussion. That didn't help. But at the end of the day, if you look at last game, he only got 2 carries, and they were on the goal line. I understand why DeAndre Swift is your main back because of the home run potential. And we've seen that more games more often than not. But today, I mean, he had 1 long run of 12. Got to credit the Detroit Lions defense, even though, let's be real, that Detroit Lions defense got weaker and weaker as the game went on because they kept getting banged up. Bears too. This lends to my whole, I really don't like Thursday games. It's too short of a week. And this is coming from, the medical practitioner in me. Obviously, the football fan, I love watching football. And if I can watch it across a bunch of days, I like that. But from a health perspective, you see time and time again, Thursday games just aren't a great product. They're sloppy and people get hurt. A lot of people get hurt. And that happened on both sides of the ball. But that being said, you should have been able to attack this Lions team a bit better in the second half, even than they did. This is Roshan Johnson's second concussion. Last time he was out a good chunk of time. Jaquan Brisker has been out a long time. Is still on IR. He's got a couple weeks left to finish that out. I don't love what this organization does for most of their injury management, to be completely honest, and especially their concussion management. I think it's absolute trash. So I'm concerned with the longevity of these guys getting concussions. And if you want to extend that into the Bears season, who is your backup to DeAndre Swift? You have Travis Homer right now, who is a guy. He's more of a special teams guy, more of a third down back. And then, you have Darrington Evans on the practice squad. And actually, when he's suited up for the Bears before, he's done pretty well. But you trade away Khalil Herbert. Now, obviously, that was right to do for Khalil. Now he has a chance to do something on the Bengals. He hasn't really had a ton of opportunity yet, but more so than he had on the Bears when he was constantly inactive. But, now you don't have him. And he would be a pretty good, running option right now, even with his pass catching deficiencies and his pass blocking deficiencies. So This run game has to be better. Some of that is up front. The offensive line needs to get a better push. But a lot of it, in my opinion, is also DeAndre Swift. He tries, a run's called to the A or B gap, he bounces to the C gap. He doesn't run through common color as often as you'd like. Like, it doesn't look like there's really a hole, but you run up through your guard and past. That's really where you get those consistent runs, right? Those are the David Montgomery runs that you saw yesterday. David trusted his blocking. He hit the hole he's supposed to hit, and then he makes a cut, 1 foot in the ground and go. DeAndre doesn't do that enough, and that bothers me. And you've lost the guy that did do that in Roschon Johnson, who would get you 3 yards, 4 yards, 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, 9 all of a sudden. I think he's a guy that needs to get in rhythm, and it's, hey, it's like medicine. You just got to keep taking it and eventually get those bigger ones. But it's hard for him to get in rhythm when you keep going back to Swift. If you also want to layer that on there, like, again, Swift is doing so much better than he did to begin the year, but also his pass blocking is so bad. You see it time and time again where he's been opting now more to do this cut blocks. But what happens when you do a cut block, especially if it's a quick pass, is that the defender is either going to try to leap over or tumbles over the cutter, and now they're often in the passing lane. You need to stonewall that guy, try to keep in order to keep their hands down. So anyway, this running game, as I thought, is still struggling and will continue to struggle the rest of the year. And that's not going to change until you improve the offensive line a bit, get more push, get more heft. And also, Swift's going to be here next year. I think Roschon's going to be here next year, but do you potentially look at adding to that backfield? Maybe, in some way, shape, or form. Something I was a bit surprised by. Oh, really quickly, Chris Armstrong. I arrived late and he concerned with Roschon's third concussion in as many years. Yes, it's a huge problem right now. It's very concerning, partially because of the physiology of it, the science of it. Multiple concussions, all of a sudden you start to stack free radical formation, which is basically what happens when you get a concussion within the brain. You start to lose. There's all these different parts that you have to look at when it comes to concussions. So you talk about ocular, you talk about eye, vestibular, so inner ear, balance, things of that nature, and then also cervical neck. That's going to be strength. That's going to be headache. That's going to be all these other things. When you start to have multiple issues like that stacked up, and you're not getting the right treatment, which I don't believe he is, that's going to affect things like vision. It's going to affect, and that's literally like able to just see, but also your running back vision. It's going to affect your proprioception, awareness of your body in space. It's going to affect memory. It's going to affect heart rate. It's going to affect some muscular strength downriver. People don't realize that if you multiple concussions or even one concussion, all of a sudden you can have changes in muscular output, arms, legs, etc. Like, that all matters. When I treat people for concussions, my treatments involve all of those things. It is not just treating the brain. And I don't think he's getting that. So that's kind of what I said before I wrapped up that last section. You're not like cutting Roschon or anything like that, but you might need another option this year in the draft, probably somewhere, that you're taking a running back, because are you really getting enough on the field from Roschon? I don't think that's all his fault, but also, are you concerned about the long-term health? And that can extend to Jaquan too. That is Jaquan a guy you're going to pay, not because of what he's doing on the field, because I think he's fantastic on the field, but because of the availability. And so now all of a sudden, are you looking at safety, right? Again, probably in the draft, where Jaquan, hey, love you, and we're going to use as much as we can of you, but we're going to have someone waiting in the wings just in case we need them. All right, and then in terms of the surprise buy, I was surprised about what Keenan Allen gave us. Not necessarily in terms of catches, because that's been his MO the last couple of weeks, right? He led the team in targets last week. He had a good amount of catches, but it's some of the intangibles that I felt. His stat line was good, right? 5 for 8, 73 yards, and 2 touchdowns, long of 31. You will absolutely take that from your wide receiver too, which we can have a conversation about wide receiver 1 to an extent too, but that's a whole other thing. I'm talking more about, getting injured and coming back like he did. He was clearly still hobbled with that ankle injury, and he was still able to get out there and produce for you. The timeliness of his catches, right? It was right place, right time. When you needed it, he gave it to you. And then the fire he had when he had his head basically ripped off, drawing a flag because he threw the ball at an official. That should have been a penalty on the lines. I do not understand how it wasn't. I don't blame him at all for acting how he did too. That's a health and safety thing, but also, and it wasn't the worst flag because field position wise, since you were so close to your own goal line, it didn't hurt you too much. But that was absolutely ridiculous, and I feel for the guy because again, that's a neck injury would be detrimental for him if that happened, and a tackle like that could absolutely create that. So I thought today, and what you see from his blocking too, he's one of the better wide receiver blockers. I mean, he's not, and I say that more in terms of effort. He tries very hard, and he will at least be in the way and sometimes get a really good block. Um, there are certain receivers who are not as willing of blockers, and that bothers me. And I think y'all know who that might be. A little bonus one, just throw out there. I was surprised just Komet's blocking issues too. And I don't. Some of it seems like sometimes the team as a whole doesn't know where to go. So you'll see that maybe Mercedes and Komet will be blocking the same guy when they shouldn't be. One guy peels off the wrong time. But there are also some times where Komet will just miss a block that in previous years he didn't as much, and so we need some more consistency from that, and that's affecting the run game in particular. His pass blocking is more consistent. The run is, I think, where you see a little fall off where he misses his guy, and that guy is making the tackle as Swift's trying to hit through a hole. So a little bonus one for you there. It's going to be a good day. Something positive. The Bears have a quarterback, and a damn good one. Caleb Williams is that dude. Here's a list of QBs that have thrown for more than one touchdown against the Lions this year. Caleb Williams, end of list. That is it. The last 3 weeks, his passer rating has been 95, 103.1, and 97.8. On the year, he has 2,612 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. If you want to look at his fellow rookies who have started all year, Jane Daniels has 2,613 yards, 1 yard more. He's got 12 touchdowns, so 2 less, and the same amount at 5 interceptions. Bo Nix has 2,548 passing yards, 16 passing touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. So right now, Bo Nix and Jane Daniels are in this rookie of the year conversation, offensive rookie of the year conversation. Caleb has been forgotten because the Bears have been bad. And yes, you want to make the whole thing of, well, team success matters, all that. But when you look at the basic stats of it all, Caleb is doing just as well. And that was after a rough first half of the year. So imagine if all of a sudden this current iteration could have been extrapolated or gone back in time. You're talking about a totally different situation. So Bears fans should be very happy about what they have in Caleb Williams. So Brad Biggs also just tweeted about 3 minutes ago. Routine scheduled for Matt Eberflus to have a Zoom availability this morning at 9. The Bears have yet to confirm that. Experience tells me not to read too much into that. You just never know. So, we still got about 30 minutes here. Maybe something changes in terms of the head coaching front. Next section, concussed corner. So the obvious one is the lack of timeout at the end of the game. We just talked about that. I'm not going to dive back into that. I'll talk. The bonus one I'll throw out there is Eberflus's challenge on the Jameson Williams drop. That goes back to being 2 for 10 on challenges in his career. It's not all on him because he's on the sideline. He doesn't see the play all the time. Whoever is up in the box who's supposed to be the person watching these replays and saying, "Hey, Matt, challenge this or don't challenge this," they need to be fired because it's absolutely horrendous. And it was pretty obvious. I mean, even like my sister, who is recently started watching more football, but she's like, "That's not a catch." And I was like, "Yeah, no duh." So and that timeout would have been fantastic to have, right? Because it's not just about the loss of challenge. It's the fact that you lose that timeout, and the Bears have consistently needed timeouts at the end of halves and at the end of games. They're too valuable. We here for moral support, an area to work on. The run D is offensive. That's how bad it is. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the show. If you look at the first quarter yards in Detroit, the Lions had 85 rushing yards and the Bears had -1. The Bears run D can't stop anyone, like at all. Don't get me wrong, Gibbs and Montgomery, Sonic and Knuckles, and by the way, their shoes were pretty sweet yesterday. I'd love a pair of Sonic and Knuckles cleats. Gibbs and Montgomery are awesome. They're one of the best if not the best tandem of running backs in the league right now. And you pair that with how great the Lions' offensive line is, it's very hard, if not impossible, to stop them. But this is a trend. The Bears are close to the bottom of the league in rushing yards allowed per game at 25th worst with 135.1 per game. Today, they allowed 194 yards, nearly 200 on the ground alone. That has to improve. I don't know. It's not going to happen this year. You just don't have the bodies for it. But going forward, this offseason, you got to and everyone listening to this right now knows this. The emphasis has to be not just on the offensive line, because that's one of the biggest conversation pieces, but the defensive line too, and not just edge. You're hoping you have Billings back, but you need more depth. You need more rotation. Andrew Billings shouldn't even have to play as many snaps as he is playing. He should be able to rotate off more. So ultimately, you need to get more big uglies in there, and that has to happen in free agency. Bears currently, I believe, have 8th most cap space, and it has to happen in the draft. All right, one more break, and then we're going to get into the back end of this show. What's important? Stat. A stat from the game that felt was important. I'm shifting off this a little bit. I just think a stat that is more colloquial all around, that is just important for us to focus on in our time of need, as you can say. Caleb Williams is now in sole possession of the Chicago Bears rookie passing touchdown record with 12. Williams also broke the NFL rookie record for most passing attempts without an interception, surpassing the previous 211 attempts held by Kyler Murray, and is now adding to that impressive total. Williams now owns the record for the rookie passing yards and touchdown for the Chicago Bears. Yes, I know. It's a low bar. We understand that. But at some point, you have to pass that bar, even if it's a low one. And again, I gave you the previous stats for some of the fellow rookies this year. He's right on par with them, even after the rough start. Now, that's not to say Caleb has been perfect, because there were some throws in this game, too, where you're like, that should have been an interception. There were some throws in the previous game. One in particular I can remember. I mean, he threw it right to Stephon Gilmore, and Gilmore dropped it. Stephon Gilmore 3 years ago probably catches that. So it's not like he's keeping the ball totally out of harm's way, but he's doing it enough that you get games like he had, where he throws for 256 yards, 3 touchdowns, was 20 for 39 with a passer rating of 97.8. Now, he is on pace for 3,700 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, which would be 3rd best in Bears history. If he averages 246 passing yards per game, this would be best in Bears history. If he gets 278 yards per game for the remaining games, he would get to 4,000 yards. His last 3 games, his average has been 275. Let that sink in. If you can continue this trend, and you just played your 3 divisional teams, who right now, all 3 of those teams have good defenses and are trending currently to make the playoffs, and he was able to average 275 passing yards against them with 0 interceptions, multiple touchdowns. Going back to my, making you feel good, you have a dude. So any of the individuals who for some reason are still holding on to the previous quarterbackness of it all, Caleb is the guy. One side note, I need Caleb to make some better decisions for his body. That one scramble he had, get out of bounds, my guy. Like, you can't take a hit like that. That's one funky force angle away from being a detrimental injury. You can't have that, especially with how much damage he's taking in the pocket, with the number of sacks he's taking. These things add up. He's not like a small guy, but he's also not, Anthony Richardson size. You got to take care of yourself. All right, kombucha peak performance moments. This is our defining moment from the game. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. The momentum in this game was all Lions early. With 1:54 left in the first half, the Lions take over after a Bears 4-and-out. That also was an odd play call. I don't like on 4th and short why you're throwing essentially a fade route up the sideline. I don't love that, but that's a whole other conversation. The Lions were on the Chicago 37. Jahmyr Gibbs catches a swing pass and carries it down to the Bears' 7-yard line. Jonathan Owens initiates the tackle, and Tyreek Stevenson flies in to force a fumble, stopping the Lions from scoring and beginning the Bears' comeback attempt. Now, Stevenson has struggled mightily after the Hail Mary, getting consistently burned and losing his job slowly to Terrell Smith, who Terrell Smith's had more flashes, but he had some issues in this game too. So I like Terrell Smith. I've been a bit of a Tyreek Stevenson apologist. I get all that, but like there's a conversation and things that need to happen at the cornerback two position, and we got to figure that out. But anyway, to make that play, spark a comeback, especially for a player who plays like Stevenson, right? And for better or worse, he plays with energy. He plays with a little nasty, and I personally think that's what you need at corner. You have to be that kind of player. Now, he cannot do what he's consistently done, though, in terms of the smack talking, chirping at whether it's, players on the field, the sideline, fans, all that stuff. You need to channel that smack, right? A good example of that was when Jameson Williams got his penalty where he flipped the ball to Tyreek Stevenson. Hey, another play by Tyreek Stevenson, and got, the penalty called on him. In that moment, Jameson Williams, look back and he could have chirped at Tyreek and moved on with his life, but he flipped the ball at him, cost his team very important yards there. Be an agitator, but be smart with how you're an agitator. And I think for Tyreek, that play could be a catalyst moving forward. We'll see, because you need confidence to play the position the way he does. Does that give him a little spark, bit more of that confidence going forward? Because it definitely did help this game. Because if the Lions scored, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown, and they were rolling on that drive, I mean, that was the first play of that drive, and they were able to get down to the 7 before the fumble, that this game might be over. But now all of a sudden, you create a situation where you can go down and get points before the half ends. You feel a little better in the locker room, et cetera, et cetera. Massive play. Master player of the game, aka MVP. It's Caleb. It's simple as that. Caleb Williams is, like I said, he's the dude. I'm not going to go to him places because that was the previous guy, and I used that too much for Justin, and even if it was a bit potentially misplaced looking back. I think some other people that deserve some nods here. DJ Moore had 16 targets, 8 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown. When the Bears needed something, he was there. I don't love his effort on plays where he's clearly not getting the ball. I don't love his run blocking effort. He had that big drop in the game. He came back and got a touchdown, the next series. But if you're wide receiver 1, if you're paid as, the highest paid player in the organization, the highest contract ever handed out, those are plays you need to make. And effort can never be a question. But he was big in this game. I do also want to give a nod to Javon Dexter. I know there's been some chatter about how important he is or lack thereof. I mean, he had 3 tackles in this game, a big sack for 9 yards in this game, and that was one of there's a half sack by Sanborn. Just checking some of the stats I have behind me there. So Dexter also deserves a nod. Not necessarily enough for this category, but a nod. And of course, I think Tyreek also deserves a little thought process for what he did there for the forced fumble. But at the end of the day, this team, not just this game, but the last 3 weeks especially, but really the last whole season, if you're being honest, it's been Caleb. It'll beat Caleb. He is putting this team on his back while still trying to learn as a rookie, still making rookie mistakes. He is a rookie. But he's able to overcome them and keep them in these games. And that's important. Simple as that. Prognosis period. Looking ahead. Still just checking, making sure that nothing is happening. Because, again, we have about 16-ish minutes until Flus, in theory, is supposed to talk to the media. If you fire Matt Eberflus, I don't think Thomas Brown should be the head coach. That is nothing against Thomas Brown at all. What he is doing with Caleb is just too important, invaluable, and is the most important part of this. I don't think you detract away from that by having him do CEO decisions like, challenges, timeouts, locker room, like specific stuff. Because when you're the head coach, right, you have to bop around. You're in the offensive room. You're in the You're in the defensive room. You're in the special teams room. You're in the linebacker meetings. It's everything and everything. And right now, Caleb's continued development is too important to take away from that, even if it's 10%. I get the argument of a head coach tryout because he's going to be someone that if and when Eberflus gets fired, gets a head coach interview here. He absolutely should for the work he's doing here. And would it help you in that interview process to let him kind of do the job already? Yeah, it would help. But you can get a lot of that info just with him as essentially interim OC. Also, when you have these interim head coaches, it's not always like hey, you're truly the head coach, right? The responsibilities are shared more, if you're being completely honest. It just doesn't happen it wouldn't make sense. It's too much to take on. So even if he's not interim OC, all of us, he's gonna get more responsibilities. Let's reduce it so that we can again keep Caleb moving on the right path. In my opinion, let Hightower do that other stuff. Special teams coordinators are usually a good person for that because they know everybody. Just because with special teams, you have to deal with literally every single player on the roster. And at the end of the day, too, some of the other responsibilities there, they're not quite as robust as it might be on offense, it might be on defense. I thought Washington for a little bit might have been a good choice, but I think at this point, because if you let Eberflus go, he now is going to call plays. So now all of a sudden, do you say, hey, call plays and be OC? That's a lot. It's kind of the same thing with the Thomas Brown argument I made earlier. One that might be interesting, make history. The first NFL female head coach as an interim role and elevate Jennifer King. Currently, she's a running backs assistant coach, but as a player, she played in the Women's Football Alliance as a quarterback and wide receiver for the Carolina Phoenix. She was a defensive back and wide receiver for the New York Sharks, a safety for the DC Divas. She had her hands in a lot of different places. She's been a lot of in offensive position rooms in her early career. I think that would also be an interesting choice to have there. Looking ahead, though, next week, you have a late afternoon game at the 49ers who have their own host of issues coming off the mini-bye. That's the perfect time to let a new voice take hold, right? You didn't want to do this last week because it's a short week. Got to turn around for the Lions game, but you have a couple days to just kind of figure some stuff out, get your ducks in order here. It's a time to move on. As for that 49ers team, they're struggling a bit. Purdy didn't play last game. He's supposed to play this week in theory. See how that goes. Looking ahead, so he probably would be back for the Bears game. And at the end of the day, I want whether Purdy plays or not, or what really happens on the 49ers side, that doesn't truly affect, in my opinion, what's important for the Bears going forward, because it's just Caleb. So having Caleb go out and have another good performance against a lesser 49ers team, right? I mean, look at their defensive line during their Super Bowl run versus what their defensive line is now is not the same, just not the same strength or teeth to that team. Same thing on offense. Obviously, Ayuk is lost on the year with that ACL tear. Kittle's been in and out of the lineup. Debo, I think, a little slower, not literally speed, but just hasn't been the same guy. And now he's had to take more of a load. They have a rookie wide receiver there that missed a good chunk of time because he got shot. So there's a lot going on there. I mean, it's loud enough where 49ers fans are calling for a potential firing of Kyle Shanahan, which is insane. That's the whole grass is always greener on the other side thing. And if for some reason they did let Kyle Shanahan go, which is, I think, a 1% chance, you're ridiculous. So I'm just highlighting that to show 49ers land is not in a good place. So at a minimum, you should be getting a interesting game up next week coming off that mini bye. All right. That's what I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Black Friday. Hopefully, right, we will be hearing some news in the next 24 hours or so that things are going to be changing for this team. Simple enough just to preserve the locker room and preserve what you have, because this is still the young pieces you have here. You have plenty of them between your Kyler Gordons, Montez Sweat. Is still, he's not old or anything by any means. When you got Darnell Wright, who suffered an I believe a knee injury, I have to see the play. If anyone has a that play in particular, he got hurt. Send it to me because I haven't found it yet. Because I'd like to look at it and see potentially what he's dealing with. But he did get carted off the field. But Darnell Wright has looked better these last couple of weeks too. You can just keep going and going with. This is a team that is a couple pieces away from being truly a contender. And you can see that. I mean, they've lost by a total of 7 points in their 3 divisional losses. 7. In all 3 of them, you can make the argument that they should have won. So stay positive. Keep in mind what this is all about. Keep Caleb healthy and enjoy the rest of your Black Friday. Have a good one.
What have they got that I ain't got? Courage. You could say that again.